Hello YouTube divers, this is WaterDive 122 and I want to welcome you all to another episode of Magic Metal Mondays. Today we are back with another top 5 albums of the year video. And this time we are going to be talking about one of the best years for metal and really rock in general. We are going to be talking about the year 1986. So now, the only thing I have to say about this list is that there's one rock band on this list. So it's not completely metal, but, 4 out of the 5 bands that are on this list are metal. So, without further ado, let's get frickin' started. Coming in at number 5, we got Darkness Descends by Dark Angel. One of my all-time favorite thrash metal albums, really one of my all-time favorite metal albums by anybody. This is a freaking masterpiece. It is a underrated classic. It is thrash metal being thrash metal, only more aggressive, only more ferocious, only more complicated, even more technical, even more quicker. You freaking name it. This album takes everything that you know and love about thrash metal and speeds it up, makes it more insane, makes it more technical, makes it more mind-boggling to follow along with. This album is just the complete package. I mean, really, the first 3 songs on this album, Darkness Descends, which has a phenomenal riff. I never get tired of the riff in Darkness Descends. You have the craziest I Will Get Out, Burning of Sodom, which is one of my all-time favorite thrash metal songs. And of course the high memorability, if that's even a word, that is Hunger of the Undead. These 3 tracks open up the album in such a kick-butt way. And then you get songs like Merciless Death and Perish in Flames, which are just insane to the fullest extent. Not really much else I can say about Darkness Descends. I will make an album review of this album, and I'll talk a little bit more in depth about it. But overall, this album is flawless. It's a masterpiece, and I suggest to anyone who hasn't heard of this album or this band, go check out this album. Darkness Descends by Dark Angel, coming in here at number 5. Number 4, we get another masterpiece here, although before I listened to this album, I didn't actually think it was a masterpiece. Shocker. But this album proved me wrong. We are talking about Peace Sells, But Who's Buying by Megadeth. Peace sells, but who's buying? Peace sells, but who's buying? I know, I never get that chorus out of my head. Before we start, let's just talk about the songs that are on this album. This album has a lot of great songs, whether from Wake Up Dead, The Conjuring, Devil's Isle, or Island, Devil's Island, something like that. Good Morning, Black Friday, the freaking amazing title track, to Dave Mustaine's amazing vocals, to the very mid-80s production style, to the amazing musicianship, to the amazing riffs, to the amazing drum solos, to the amazing bass riffs, to the amazing everything. Everything about this album is just great, and I see why it is considered to be a metal classic. This is a metal classic. No, I do not think it is their best album, but it's up there with some of their best. Dave Mustaine, Dave Ellefson, Gar Samuelson, and Chris Poland. I know this would be the last album to feature these guys together. And I know Chris Poland would rejoin Megadeth on later albums, and sadly Gar Samuelson is no longer alive. Rest in peace, Gar Samuelson. He was a great drummer for his time. He definitely served his purpose for Megadeth. He was just great. But, overall, this album is a masterpiece. It's a phenomenal album, and I definitely think it deserves the love and praise that it gets. And I was a fool to ever have thought that this album is overrated. It is not overrated. It is. It's a freaking fantastic album. Now that we get to number 3, the only rock album on this list. We're talking about an album that was created by one of my all-time favorite bands, REM. And if you're a fan, you know which album I'm talking about. I'm talking about Life's Rich Pageant. Life's Rich Pageant is an album where it feels like REM is figuring out who they want to be. This album shows REM taking a step in the right direction, and it just works so well that I can't even describe how great this album is. Now, the only thing that does kind of bother me is the production and Michael Stipe's vocals a little bit. Now, don't get me wrong, I love Michael Stipe. He's one of my all-time favorite rock singers, for that matter. But, I wasn't really... and, same thing how I feel about James Hetfield of Metallica, for example. I wasn't really a big fan of, the vocals on their first couple of albums. But they got better and better over time. And, that's how I feel about Michael Stipe. In my opinion, his vocals were kind of weak sauce on the first 3 REM albums, with the exception of a few tracks here and there, of course, like Radio Free Europe from the first album, or South Central Rain from The Reckoning, or Green Grow the Rushes, Driver 8 from the previous album, Fables of the Reconstruction. And then Life's Rich Pageant comes out, and in my opinion, he starts to really shine. I mean, don't believe me? Go listen to songs like Fall on Me and Flowers of Guatemala. I mean, these 2 tracks are just crushing tracks, especially Fall on Me, which is one of the best songs REM ever made. And Flowers of Guatemala, to me, is one of their most underrated songs. It's a beautiful song, and, really, these 2 tracks also show the, the vocal abilities for both Michael Stipe and Mike Mills, because, I love both of their voices, and when their voices mix, it mixes so freaking well. I mean, I can't even explain it. Begin to Begin is also a phenomenal track. It's a great way to open up this album. Cuyahoga, I believe that's on this album, I could be wrong, is also a great song. I love this album. It's a great REM album, and to me it sets up the stage for what REM would later go on to be known for. So with that said, Life's Rich Pageant by REM coming in here at number 3. Now, number 2. These next 2 picks are 2 of my all-time favorite albums. 2 of my top 10 favorite albums of all time. I love both of these albums almost equally, but I have my reasons for ordering them the way that I do. But honestly, these 2 albums could be interchangeable any given day depending on how I feel about them. And at number 2, as of today, my number 2 pick has to go to Rain and Blood by Slayer. I already did a whole album review of this album. You could go back on the Magic Metal Mondays playlist and check that out if you so greatly desire to do so. I talk a little bit more about why this album is so important to me as a metalhead. It's a great album from start to finish. I don't need to talk about Angel of Death or Raining Blood. Both are phenomenal tracks. Both are classics in thrash metal. I mean, come on. But Necrophobic, and especially Jesus Saves, Altar of Sacrifice, Piece by Piece, Postmortem, you freaking name it, this album is flawless. This is a masterpiece, and it's a classic for a reason, and it's easily my favorite Slayer album. So with that said, Rain and Blood coming in here at number 2. Now, number 1, another metal classic and another icon within the metal community. We are talking about Master of Puppets by Metallica. Now, I love this album equally, and I say an emphasis on equally. I love this album equally as much as I do Rain and Blood. The only reason why I have this album higher than Rain and Blood, as of right now, is because Master of Puppets is more of an important record to me. This was one of the records that was my foundation into my journey of metal. No, into metal for that matter. This was one of the first metal records I'd ever heard, and, loved this album ever since. I mean, from the title track, which is my all-time favorite Metallica song, my second favorite metal song of all time, Masterpiece. Battery opens up the album with an absolute juggernaut. It is just so great. It's so memorable. And Damage Incorporated, Welcome Home Sanitarium, Thing That Should Not Be, Leper Messiah, Orion, which is one of the greatest metal instrumentals of all time. Is that even up for debate? Overall, this album is a masterpiece. What more can I say? It's my favorite Metallica album. I mean, come on, you already know that. Because I literally ranked Metallica's albums like twice. So, excuse me. Yeah, this is a masterpiece. And, before we end the video here, this is the album where, in my opinion, James Hetfield starts to get his vocal performances right. I mean, I'm personally not a big fan of his vocal performances on their debut album, Kill 'Em All. Ride the Lightning, he did get a little bit better. I mean, like on Fade to Black, and For Whom the Bell Tolls, and Creeping Death, and, a couple of other songs here and there. But here on Master Puppets, to me, it feels like that James is starting to really get into his signature sound. And, later albums down the road, we all know what happens there. And I just thought I would just bring that up there. But overall, Master of Puppets by Metallica, easily one of the greatest metal albums of all time. It's definitely one of my favorites of all time, one of my favorite albums of all time. This album, like with Rain and Blood and Darkness Descends, and pretty much all the albums on this list, is freaking flawless. This is a great album from start to finish. Go listen to it if you haven't heard it already. So with that said, that concludes this edition of Magic Metal Mondays. Thank you so much for watching, my fellow YouTube divers. This is WaterDive122 signing out, ready to dive into more fun on YouTube. Thanks for watching.